Om Namah Shivaya. Hello? I don't know, again or before. From this place of love, I'm happy to offer two programs that I pray will be of benefit in support of YogaFest Michigan this year, online edition. And of course, I've been able to be with you the last few years in person, and this year it's a different way of being with you. So still, there's the person. So I'm with you in person. There's a person. So this last one was Raja Yoga Sutras, and here today we'll talk about practical Vedanta, which is the transformative power of study and living in accordance with the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, which are said to be the cream of the teachings of Vedanta. In fact, in a moment we'll start with the Gita Dhyanam. But first, this prayer. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Ambalo Satguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki Jai. Ambalo Sri Swami Vishnu Devananda Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai, or victory for all of the masters of all of the traditions, along with great gratitude. Jai. Om. So we're in Durga Temple at the Divine Grace Yoga Ashram in Cottonwood near Sedona, Arizona. We're close to the Ganga in the form of the Verde River here. There in Michigan, you have the Ganga in the form of the Pigeon River. All rivers are the Ganga, it is said. The Ganga is the first river and still flows in the form of all rivers in this beautiful earth. So we have Mata Ganga who rules this space. This area is you wouldn't imagine it to be desert. In fact, here I'll do this. I'll give you a quick spin, hopefully without a headache, without dizziness. So these are the cottonwoods, the famous cottonwoods here in northern Arizona. We're about 3,500 feet elevation here. I'm sorry I spun it a little faster that time. So now we're back. And that direction opposite the temple that we were just pointing is the river. And then this space, as you can tell, is quite verdant and green, mostly year-round. Just like Michigan, it gets cold in the winter, but not as cold. And these leaves drop. And then in the beginning of the season again, the cotton comes from the buds. And it blows everywhere, and everything gets covered. It's not really cotton, but it appears like cotton, kind of like our situation here. Not really a world, but it appears like a world, and certainly we'll dive into that. So very, very happy to be able to be with you in any possible form. So we're discussing yoga, and we talk about this a little bit during the Raja Yoga session as well, of course. What is yoga really? And of course, during this program, many on the mat practices and off the mat practices and other teachings of the philosophy and Shastra and all of this. So from this perspective, just to say this, yoga is not an exercise. It is a state. It is a state. The word describes a state where one is free of suffering. And the purpose of this life is said to be to free ourselves from suffering, otherwise called moksha. So yoga is that state of moksha, a union with that state, which is your own true nature. It is said that happiness is within, the kingdom is within, that all that is sought is actually within, and also at some level this entire universe is within, that everything is within. Mind-boggling, of course. But we certainly learn that the happiness that we've been seeking in external pursuits is fleeting, if it really exists at all. So yoga is also not just this state, but a science. It is truly the science of yoga, and we are all scientists practicing our craft. It is as if we each have a petri dish, and the mind is the petri dish, if we know what a petri dish is. If not, Google will know. Please look it up. So, a petri dish, a place where we put stuff that we collect and that we create in the mind, the petri dish, and something grows from it, and then we experience what grows. And this is truly a science experiment. And regardless of what we have in our minds, and our minds and the state of our minds dictate the quality of our experience, it can be accurately and fairly said that each of us have our own worlds, that there's not really one world, although there is an experiential plane which is consistent for all of us, but the nature of the experiences and the desires that we have and how we pursue the desires, the methods that we use, all of these really are the definition of our own individual worlds. And these worlds of our own creation are created through our own prior thoughts and words and actions. In other words, what have we put in the petri dish? It said that everything has two phases. One is expansion or growth, and the other is contraction, decay, but also when you go out, you come back. And here, if we can imagine that we've gone out and somehow we've gotten lost along the way and we've come into a place of great suffering and pain and anxiety and stress and fear and anger and hatred and judgment and all of this, that's only the out, but that there's also a way back into the center, back into the truth of you, the truth of us, peace, silence, joy, the inner child, the deep inner child, the innocence, the state of innocence. Just as there is a path out, there's also a path in. And this path in is yoga, science. It's said like this, and this is from Swami Sankarananda. He speaks of yoga in this way, this great path of yoga, and really the four paths of yoga. Says that there is a natural evolution for each of us. And the quote goes like this, that yoga is the intensification of mankind's natural evolution. The intensification of mankind's natural evolution. And the evolution would be said to be that we come out and we get caught up and we suffer and we add to the suffering and it becomes a mess. And we want to be free of the suffering, and we begin to realize that our own thoughts and words and actions have caused our suffering. We start to ask big questions like, what is this world? And who am I? And we wish to explore these. I remember the moment at which I realized that I knew nothing. And what a joyous moment it was, because it took so much pressure off. I realized in this moment, not only do I know nothing, but also that I couldn't really know anything. In this way, the moment before this, I remembered And I'd lived a very big life and lots of stuff, lots of people and lots of pursuits and lots of cars and lots of moves and lots of jobs and money, but never enough. And all of this never enough to satisfy. Just the opposite of that. And at some point, I asked myself the question, will this lead to happiness? I realized in this moment before that all I'd ever wanted was to be happy. And so there was a new ruler, a measuring stick that re-emerged in the life. And the ruler, the measuring stick was, will this lead to happiness? And Peace Pilgrim would say, will this lead to peace, inner peace, which are really the same. And I looked at all of the things I'd done, all of the decisions I'd made. It was like a life review that came in a moment. And I realized, oh my God, none of it. None of it. None of it had led to happiness. That was clear by that point. I'd been wanting to kill myself for 3 years straight by then and had crafted a few plans on how I might do it. So I couldn't check the box in any regard related to any lasting happiness. Yeah, momentary experiences of happiness and joy, but nothing that lasted. And I realized, oh my God, if I don't know how to be happy, then what good is my knowledge? And I started to look at all the people that I'd followed at that point. And I'd followed so many people that also lived big lives in different ways. And I asked the question, are they happy? And I realized, no, they're not. They were suffering from the same disease that I was. And so the next question that came is, how in the world could following people that don't know where happiness is lead me to happiness? How in the world following my own ideas of where happiness is could lead me to happiness if I didn't really know where happiness was? So I was able in one fell swoop, and it took a minute. It took a little bit. It took some days and weeks, but not too long to have some clarity about direction, to clear the plate and say, well, this isn't serving. If it's not serving, why in the world am I going to give it energy any longer? This is speaking to the evolution of mankind. We evolve out, as it were, but then our evolution doesn't continue to take us out. At some point, our path brings us back in, because by nature, not being able to experience happiness, we will keep going until we find it, which means that the natural evolution, if happiness is within, will lead us to check boxes, one after the other, and some of them so many times, until we finally realize, after countless births, by the way, that's the other part of the equation that we forget about so easily, is we've been here how many times before? Oh my God. You know, the Buddha was once asked the question by a disciple, how many times have we been here before? And the Buddha looks at a mountaintop and he says, Bhikkhu? He says, look at that mountaintop. Do you see? Yes. He says, the amount of time that it will take for a pigeon to fly over that mountain, and the pigeon having occasionally picked up a strand of cloth in its beak, and the strand of cloth in the beak causing some disturbance to the mountain when he flies over, the amount of time that it takes for the mountain finally to be worn down through that process, that's how long you've been coming here. That's how long we've been coming here. Shankaracharya, Adi Shankaracharya says that coming here right now, that is having an interest, having a real interest in yoga, having an interest in the teachings about the path and the what's called the path home, Vedanta, the end of knowledge, or the transcending the worldly knowledge and imbibing in the knowledge of oneself. Shankaracharya says to have the interest in study, of this, if you're still joining, you're in this select group, is the only possible through the punyas or merits of 100 billion well-lived births. So yes, indeed, the masters will say we've been here before. And so this evolution, and now and natural evolution, because you can't stop until you're happy. My God, let's say I would have been successful and would have killed myself. Let's say for just a moment that I would have been successful with that. Well, I would have discovered, just like everyone who has a near-death experience and comes back to tell us about it or write a book about it, thousands upon thousands of souls that fit this category in our modern times and tell us, they all tell us the same thing. I would have realized after my death that I wasn't dead. And oh my God, what do I have to do now to overcome the karma accrued from the actions that I've taken now? As it is, it's tough enough. And then I would have added something else to it. So, thank God. And so the punyas of 100 billion well-lived births brings us here. This is how precious is this human birth. It's also said that all of the souls want human birth, but according to their karmas, and this is discussed in the Gita, they might have to take other types of births first. Maybe grass, maybe stone, maybe an atom, maybe a planet, maybe a sun, maybe a tree, maybe a cat, maybe a dog, like this. So, intensification of the natural evolution. What does that mean? It means that what we're told is the masters, through absolute compassion, and the masters are the ones who have self-realized, who have transcended, who know themselves to be in union right now, all of the time, with the Absolute, to never be separate from the Absolute, to have transcended suffering, to no longer experience personal pain or even the person itself as who they are. That's a lot, right? But that's the concept. These sages and seers, having come to this high place, this absolute mountaintop, from sheer compassion, see the jivas, the jivatmas, the individual souls, the as if separate souls, as if a parent suffering so terribly. And so they set about to give us a path, a way out, a way to speed up the process. And of course, in speeding up the process, it also gets intensified, so that maybe we can cut a few 100 million births off of this natural evolution until we're back home. This is yoga. This is what yoga is about. Yes, absolutely. It tones the abdomen. It brings flexibility in the spine. And all of these, of course, are also so symbolic, because whatever purification of the temple is done will certainly benefit the worship that is performed within it. And one day we'll stop worshiping the temple and begin to worship that which is inside the temple. This will no doubt happen. It's part of our evolution, part of our path. And God willing, sooner rather than later, so that we can not have to experience needless suffering. It said in Raja Yoga Sutras that yoga is about stopping endless and needless is the key word, suffering. Some suffering we need because it's required to help us to see, but then we have a tendency to carry it way too far. And so, to end needless suffering. Okay, so with that little bit of background, yoga then is a system, a science. And yoga is integral science. There are 4 paths we discussed during the Raja Yoga session. Path of meditation, and then what are typically referred to as the 3 great paths: the path of devotion, bhakti yoga, the path of knowledge, or jnana yoga, and the path of selfless service, or offered work, karma yoga. And of course, the first path of meditation is also called Raja Yoga. The Shastras for these go hand in hand with the practices. Honestly, from this perspective, if you could do one thing that would benefit your practice, is if you do not have a good, understandable copy of Raja Yoga Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita. If you do not have, you must get one. You must get one. Don't practice without a manual. Just as I would say, if you're going to work on the engine of your car, you must use YouTube. You must get a manual, or what will happen? It will blow up, and then you'll be back here again in another birth after, I don't know, cat, dog, grass, grain of sand, and then here we are back in the human body again. Oh, I'm back. Don't do. Manual required. And you need to study the manual. Study them both. Read them. For gosh sakes, read them. And you'll find how practical they are. We titled this talk Practical Vedanta, and it is so practical. And now we'll dive in a little bit, just a little bit. But I pray enough to get a little taste. If you're new to this, and maybe if you're not new, maybe something will come that's of benefit. It's said our disease is one of forgetfulness, that we forget. And study of Shastra helps us to understand, to remember, and helps to bring understanding to the practices that we engage in, so that we're practicing the proper practices, so that we learn to unlock the hidden guru within us, and are not constantly beholden upon outer teachings, but we're able to connect to the real guru, not the mind that says, I'm your guru, but the intuitive self, the silent self, Dakshinamurti. If the practices and the Shastra, the manuals, go together, if you study one and practice the practices, you learn the nuance to the practices. You learn how to utilize the practices to help to deal with different challenges, different opportunities that you're discovering in this physical plane, in this physical life. And the practices help to actualize the teachings. Both are required. There is no yoga without both. There is no yoga without both. There is no yoga without both. So if you're just studying or you're just practicing, please forgive me, but it's incomplete. Please extend and include the other. Honor both, because both are required for there to be yoga. Okay, so let's begin diving into the Gita a bit. And of course, Bhagavad Gita is Gita meaning song, Bhagavad meaning Lord. And if we were in India now, we would be starting Bhagavad Gita class, our discussion of Bhagavad Gita. We'd start it with Gita Dhyanam, or meditation on the Gita. And here we have an beautiful English translation of Gita Dhyanam that we'll read. You can close your eyes and listen and contemplate and really imbibe in the words as they come. O Bhagavad Gita, by which Arjuna was illumined by Lord Krishna himself, and which was composed of 18 chapters by the ancient sage Vyasa. 18 chapters within the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa. O Divine Mother, destroyer of rebirth, who showers the nectar of oneness upon us. O Bhagavad Gita, my affectionate mother, on thee I meditate. All the Upanishads are the cows. The milker is the cowherd boy, Krishna. Arjuna is the calf. People of purified intellect are the drinkers. The milk is the supreme nectar of the Gita. My salutations to the Lord, who is the source of supreme bliss, whose grace makes the mute eloquent and the crippled cross mountains. Hari Om Tat Sat. So this last, whose grace makes the mute eloquent, speak eloquently, and the crippled cross mountains, means that anything is possible. Nothing is impossible. And this means that it is possible to unite with the Absolute, with your own highest self. It is possible to be free. It is possible to live in equanimity, in balance, and to know yourself as Satchitananda, existence, knowledge, bliss. And here we have a rule book, a book that helps us to understand how to do. So from this standpoint, we'll say practical. It's most practical to be free. It's most practical to be happy. It's most practical to be undisturbed. It's most practical to be able to be beneficial in the world. Most practical. And so in this way, practical. One of my teachers, Swami Ramaswarupananda, when I was with him in India through grace, I would have Bhagavad Gita teaching with him every single day, all of my time there with him for a year or so. And he made a point of telling me that he always started the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 6, so he's trained me to do the same. And we'll take 2 sutras. Chapter 6 is the yoga of meditation. And this really speaks to what we're dealing with at so many levels. These 2 sutras will flower up and open in time. And even now, they point the way for us. The 5th sutra, you can rise up through the efforts of your own mind, or in the same manner, draw yourself down, for you are your own friend or enemy. And the next sutra goes together, and we can talk about both of them for a moment. Number 6, as you gain control of your mind with the help of your higher self, then your mind and ego become your allies. But the uncontrolled mind behaves as an enemy. It's said that it is as if there are 2 of us. It is as if there are 2 of us within this inner person, this inner world, as if there are 2 of us. Peace Pilgrim would say beautifully and simply, there is the self-centered self, which works for individual benefit, which puts the small self, the me, first. And the world and all others, it places as servants or assets or problems of ourself. And then there is the highest self, the God-centered self, or the higher self as it's referred to here. Inner guru, the intuition, like this, which serves to uplift us. It calls us in this way, to uplift us to our true potential and a life for the benefit of the whole. It is as if there are these 2. I'll often share, I'd walked pilgrimage for about 2.5 years, and so I have a lot of experience with what I'll share. And you do too. You don't have to walk for 2.5 years. You don't have to walk across the country for this. In fact, you can just take a moment now and imagine yourself walking along a trail or the street. How long before you encounter a piece of trash? And you'll see it won't take long. It won't take long at all. And then what happens in the inner world when that piece of trash is encountered? And if you reflect on it, you'll see. Do you experience a feeling that you should pick it up? Yes, right? And also, do you experience that do you experience that please forgive, this little break is courtesy of Gopala, who is happy to be of service in any way. I'm sure this is of service. Oh, thank you, Gopala. So, okay, now I had a moment to reflect on this. Do you also experience ideas about why you shouldn't pick it up? Do you experience this idea that you don't have time, that you can't be bothered, that perhaps if you pick it up, it'll give you some cooties, it'll cause some illness or something like this? Does something rise up that says, oh my God, I can't believe somebody did this, what a terrible person, what a terrible world this is? And it can go on. And if you feed it, it gets quite nasty. And both of these will occur in the same moment. Both the feeling and the idea of not, or it might take a moment for it to settle in, but you see both of them come. And if you reflect for a moment, you see that clearly they're coming from two different places inside. They're coming from inside, but it's not the same place because they're completely juxtaposed. They're completely in opposition to each other. And there's no accommodation between the two of them. One of them is saying, pick it up. And the other one is giving you all the reasons why you should not. How do you accommodate between the two of them? You simply have to pick between them, don't you? And these will give you an idea. And there's so many other examples. Let's say that someone has wronged you and done terrible things to you and called you terrible names with other people, and they have a pattern of this, and you've forgiven them before, but now you just can't forgive them anymore, and you say, that's it, I'm never going to forgive them again. Have you had this happen? And then, so you say this, you take a vow, I'm never going to talk with them again, they're not going to darken my door, they're not going to be in my life anymore. How long before something arises within you and says, let it go. Forgive. How long? So these are examples within us, but in every moment it's here. These are examples within us of the self-centered self that's argumentative and puts this body caught in the delusion that I am this body, puts the body first, puts my needs first, my emotional needs first, all of this. It does. And the intuitive self, which puts the good of the whole, the benefit of the whole, just pick it up, puts love first. And this life is lived between these two poles, as it were. No accommodation between the two, and you constantly have to choose. So here's what's being discussed: that the same mind can be both the enemy and the friend. That the same mind, if controlled, mind and ego, if it's made to be an instrument instead of our master, controlled, will be a great friend. But that same mind and ego, uncontrolled, but rather controlling us, our master, is an enemy. Same. This is really the situation we're in, and this inner battle that we experience, and the outer battle that comes from it, is really the battlefield upon which the Bhagavad Gita is played. Of course, there's an external battlefield. It's for convenience. It's to help us to relate to the external battle. Yeah, there is. But only because of the internal battle, because there are two juxtaposed voices inside. One of them very quiet. It's called the still silent voice in many traditions. And the other very loud and needy and incessant. Oh my God, these personal desires. It's like, how much of your thought is about food? There's something to reflect on. Your desires for food, your avoidances of food, everything else. How many of the thoughts have to do with thinking about people and experiences you want to stay away from and how to stay away from them, and thinking about people and experiences that you want to be with and how to be with them? Look at that. Look at that. So it's said that the mind is a terrible master, but a beautiful servant. And so this statement is made here in the Gita. And so the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita is all about this. It's all about how do I come from this place where my mind is my master, where I've been doing its bidding. And when I described this realization some time back about not knowing anything, this is really what's being described. That I'd given, I don't know when, but I had given the keys for my life to this mind, and the mind was not trained. I was not watching over it. From this perspective, I say the mind is truly our first child, because in order to have a relationship with anyone else, a beneficial relationship, it's necessary first to have a beneficial relationship with our own mind. And I did not. The mind led me everywhere. And it's like the bull in the china shop, constant suffering, but I didn't see the connection between the two for so long. And through grace, through yoga and diving into the teachings, coupled with this massive desire to be free of suffering and not to keep doing the same kind of things that I'd been doing before that had led to it. So I'd given the keys to the mind. I said, okay, my dear mind, you take me to happiness. And it didn't tell me I don't know where it is. It said, okay, fine. Did you hear about the 12-year-old not very long ago who he took for a joyride a Lamborghini, and amazingly he didn't get into an accident. You would think that it would have happened, but it's like handing the keys to a not trained at all 5 or 6 or 7-year-old the keys to our life, for God's sakes, and saying, here, take me to happiness. And then from this perspective I can look back and laugh, because of course it's so darn predictable. But that's this perspective. From that perspective, I didn't get it. I truly didn't get it. I didn't understand. And I had to get to this point of crashing to see that, oh my God, I've given the keys to my life, to my mind. I hadn't watched over it. I didn't, the divine, the absolute is in the same body. At some level I knew it, but I kept actively forgetting about it because pursuit of the pleasurable experiences and avoidance of the painful experiences, it seemed far more important to happiness, somehow, to this reactive mind, than coming within or living dharma or putting others first or any of these things. It seemed that way. So here we speak to the choice here as we begin. So Bhagavad Gita, and this version that we're using, just like Raja Yoga Sutras, I'll recommend it, but there are many, many beautiful translations. It's just this Living Gita, it's Swami Sankarananda. It's beautifully optimized for the Western psyche. We're very jaded in the West. And so it helps us. It helps cut through the dross that we've accumulated over all of this time. And it really has the potential of speaking to our heart. It's almost entirely in English. It doesn't have any of the original Sanskrit, although it is also a very true to the original, very true to the Sanskrit teachings. So you might know already a little of the background of the Gita. There are just three characters in the Gita. Two are the primary characters. The three main characters are the head of the Pandu family, Duryodhana, who represents a-dharma, or the living out of alignment, or the ego mind as master. And then Arjuna, who represents the intellect within us, and Lord Krishna, who represents that force which is juxtaposed to the ego notion. And this is the light, the absolute light, or Lord. These are the three main characters, and there are just a couple of other characters that are ancillary, that are background. The 18 chapters, it starts with the yoga of the grief of Arjuna. It speaks to our universal challenge that comes, our universal problem, which comes as a result of taking the ego notions and the physical as the real, and pursuing happiness outside instead of remembering that it's inside. And then the rest of the Gita is organized as Sankhya Yoga, Yoga of Wisdom, and then the teachings of yoga step by step, how to be free, how to connect inextricably with the true, with the real, with the divine, and how to detach from the unreal, from the illusory, from the fleeting experience, from the notion that seems so real that I am this body. It seems so real, and yet it's not. So the rest of it helps us to move forward and to come back home. Coming home doesn't mean leaving the world. You're in the world. You're just not of it. And the yogi who's really committed herself to the path, and who's really progressing on the path, and who's really come into this state of what's called Buddhi Yoga, or the intellectual commitment to live according to the light. Doesn't mean that the journey's over, because there's still a lot of stuff to deal with. But the one who's really made this commitment, and who's well on the way to freedom, recognizes that they are neither the body nor the mind, but also they're still very much in the world, because the world is the plane of action for us, but not of it any longer, recognizing that this is an experience, a plane of experience that is given to us to work things out. So the yogas are about working it out, and the four paths we've discussed. And here, Bhagavad Gita, that we've just read from the yoga of meditation, or Raja Yoga. So it teaches the path of meditation, and how to control the mind, how to take control of the mind, and therefore take control of the life. And Karma Yoga, which is how to switch up our mode of service. Instead of doing and doing and doing for me, in order to have what I, in this mind and ego notion, desire, what I feel that I need, or what I feel I need to stay away from. Instead, to learn to be equanimous, balanced, and in the mind, and to work for the benefit of all, and offering the fruit of action instead of saying it's mine. This is also a path of freedom. Jnana Yoga, or knowledge of self, and study of Shastra and inner inquiry, is taught in the Bhagavad Gita, as is Yoga of Devotion, or Bhakti Yoga. And we'll summarize the talk today with one sutra that really addresses all of these paths. So here's the situation as we step into chapter 1. I won't read any of the sutras. We won't read a lot of sutras. We'll pick a few. And what I hope is that there's some inspiration that comes from this to pick up the Gita yourself again or for the first time and really take a little time for it and really imbibe and see what's there. So the Bhagavad Gita starts in a battlefield, and what makes it a battlefield is these two forces that are both within us, and the intellect, or Arjuna, doesn't know how they relate to each other. He, it, I have forgotten. We've forgotten who is who, which is which. We've forgotten how to recognize the one or the other. We've forgotten which one will lead us to freedom and happiness, and which one will lead us to more bondage and suffering. We've forgotten all of this. And this is what makes it a battle, because now we have to choose. These two assert, and we have to try to figure it out on our own without a roadmap, it seems, having forgotten which I am to follow. And we have to make a choice every single moment. So here, first chapter, Arjuna's on the battlefield. He's seeing people, these bodies. He's seeing people that he'd been in many battles before, but now he's seeing friends and comrades and family members that are arrayed on the other side, on the side of adharma, or wickedness. And his side, Krishna, is with him, representing dharma, or compassion, love, kindness, the virtues, virtuous life, but really truth and freedom, really representing this. And so he finds himself in the battlefield, and fight or flight starts to grasp him. You have experience with this, where you step into a situation, you know something about the situation you're stepping into, and then you see something or smell something or taste something, and it triggers within you an instinctive response of fear or grief or anger. And have you noted how quickly you can lose yourself to that when it's triggered if you're not firm in your resolve? And Arjuna in this first chapter is not yet firm in his resolve. He's being tested, and he forgets himself. And through the entirety of the first chapter, he forgets. He goes deeper and deeper and deeper. He finally says, I will not do my job. I will not fight. And really, this has nothing to do with the external battle. Please, if you want to discuss, we'll discuss. So many people will say, but this is not what it's about. It's about this inner battle. What do I choose? What do I choose? It's the inner battle that's being symbolized. And we can see it because fight or flight, he starts shaking. He goes into horripilation, and the arms and the legs, the hair stand on end. You can see other bodily functions firing off at that point as well, as his eyes dilate, the pupils dilate, he can't see anything. And he finally nearly falls to his feet and says, I don't know what to do. And through the entirety of it, the background in the Gita is that he selected Lord Krishna as his charioteer. He knew what he was doing. Lord Krishna asked him in the Mahabharata, why did you choose me? And Arjuna says, because I know who you are, my Lord. And here in the first chapter, because of fight or flight, he forgets. Can you relate to that? Can you see how you had a loving intent in a situation? How you had chosen to forgive someone or to make amends or something like this, truly loving intent, beneficial intent, and then some trigger came, and fear came. And in a series, we lost ourselves to the fear, to the anger. Have you had experience with this? And here, this is what's happening with Arjuna. He's lost himself, and he comes to him really falling at the feet of Lord Krishna. But through the entirety of the first chapter, he forgets everything. He forgets what he was supposed to do. He forgets why he was supposed to do it. And most importantly, he forgets that he chose Lord Krishna as his chariot driver. And see if this happens. See if this happens. Lord Krishna symbolizes the intuitive self, symbolizes the font of wisdom, symbolizes love itself, is closer to us than even our breath, even this blood pumping in our heart, that this Krishna is closer to us, is in this body chariot with us, in it. And this is the symbolism. And here Arjuna, this great soldier, this dharmic personage of pure intellect, forgets and completely loses himself. And can you relate? What happens to your intuition? And I know all of us have experience with intuition. What happens to our intuition when fear takes us over or anger takes us over? Is it available to us? Or does our view get shortened? Do we lose our sight? Do we lose our access to wisdom? So this is what happens. And then Arjuna, he crashes. The best I can say. He crashes. He falls apart. And he says, I will not fight. And he crumbles on the battlefield. And Lord Krishna, with great compassion, attempts to get him to stand up and pay attention and listen. And he says in chapter 2 to Arjuna, from where arises this shameful and cowardly dejection, Arjuna, which at this dangerous moment bars the path to freedom? Yield not to weakness. It does not suit you. Shake off this petty faint-heartedness. Stand up and wake up. So be present. And this is the beginning of the wisdom teaching of the Gita. And I'd just like to share a little bit and then ask a question. So it really starts here. Arjuna protests a bit more, but then he finally says to Lord Krishna, he starts to wake up a bit and he realizes who he's with. And it's like, oh my, I don't know. I don't know the way forward, he says. Please tell me. And you can imagine him falling at the feet. Please tell me. Please tell me the way forward. And Lord Krishna begins to speak, and still there's some fighting. He flails around a little bit, and then finally he really starts to listen. Kind of like our own minds, when the anger has fallen away, and now regret comes, remorse comes. Do you know that feeling? Oh my God, what did I say? What did I do? This is Arjuna now. What did I say? What did I do? And you're able to access wisdom once again. And the conscience arises in this. See, and the conscience had been completely forgotten about. And now it arises and says, you need to make amends, yes? And so here, Arjuna is at this point, and he says, what to do? So, here, this is what Lord Krishna says. And this is the essence of the teaching of wisdom from the Bhagavad Gita and all of the Upanishads. So if you're to be present, this is a good time to really be present. I'll read a few slokas and we can discuss. He says, Lord Krishna says, you are grieving for those who should not be grieved for, while uttering would-be words of wisdom. The wise grieve neither for the living nor for the dead. Now this probably will sound like a terrible statement, incompassionate, inconsiderate, and not in recognition of the grief that Arjuna is going through. Understand. But in fact, there's a reason for it, profound reason, and just allow for it and revisit it, because truly it comes from great compassion. What is happening here is Lord Krishna is trying still to wake Arjuna up from his slumber, from his having fallen into the control of fear and anger and grief. And he's shocking him here, and he's saying, you're grieving, but the wise grieve not. Grieving is a sense of loss. Grieving is a sense of loss. And what he's telling him is you're not actually losing. And if you were wise, you would know that you're not losing. And so now he continues with the teaching in this vein. How is it that you're not losing? And he steps into Sloka 12. There never was a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor any of these ruling princes, and neither will there ever come a time when we cease to be. If I could read this one more time, please listen carefully. There never was a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor any of these, and neither will there ever come a time when any of us cease to be. So if we were together physically at this point, we'd be discussing this sloka. What is he saying? I'll give you a moment to bring it forward. You can say it out loud or in the mind. What is he saying? What is he telling you? Never has been a time, nor will there ever be. He's telling you that you are eternal, isn't he? He's telling you that there has never been a time when you have not been, and there will never be a time when you are not, that you are eternal. And then he goes on and describes that which is embodied, which is you, experiences the body's childhood, youth, and old age, and also in time acquires a new body. This does not disturb one whose mind is calm. Read a bit more. In Gita, as you may know, in the English translations, the same word gets used with two completely different meanings, self and self. And here, as we go through, I'll clarify. Self, meaning with the small s, this ego self, this self-centered self. And self with a capital S self, meaning the God-centered self, or the one, the universal self, or Lord, or God, or any name that's chosen or used to point to the absolute, Satchidananda. And he describes something about yoga. He says, as the senses contact the objects of the senses, feelings of heat and cold, pain and pleasure occur, Arjuna. These sensations come and go. They're impermanent. Patiently endure them, Great One. He's calling you Great One. In fact, that person who is not tossed about by sense experiences and always stays balanced in pain and pleasure is fit to experience immortality, or to know their own truth, or to experience the truth of us. Know that all this vast universe is pervaded by that which is indestructible. No one can destroy what is everlasting and imperishable. The indwelling One, capital, is eternal, indestructible, and immeasurable. The bodies of the indwelling One, capital, are impermanent. It, this capital S self, or capital O One, is not born and it does not die. Unborn, eternal, and ancient, the self, capital S, is not killed when the body is killed. Whoever truly knows the self, indestructible, eternal, birthless, and changeless, in what way would such a person kill, Arjuna? Who would be killed? Just like casting off worn-out clothing and putting on new ones, that which is embodied casts off worn-out bodies and enters others that are new. And then speaking of this self, capital S self, weapons do not affect the self. Fire does not burn it. Water does not wet it. And wind does not dry it. The self cannot be pierced or cut. It cannot be burned, moistened, or dried. It is endless, all-pervading, stable, immovable, and everlasting. It is said to be unmanifested, inconceivable, and immutable. Knowing all this, there is no cause to grieve. So let's stop here for a moment. Now, you might have experienced, it would be very common, and arising within the mind, thought, does this mean I'm being told that it's okay to kill, that everyone, it's okay to kill, that there's no harm in killing because I am eternal and you're eternal and there's not any real death? Does it mean that? No. But that kind of equivocation, that idea will arise in the mind. That's not what's being said here. In fact, the moral teaching is here as well. Although we might not hear it in these particular sutras. That's because these sutras are pointing us at something deeper. They're pointing us here that you cannot be killed. It's not speaking of whether you have a license to kill. That's addressed. Not in these sutras, but that is addressed. You don't. We'll be clear. You don't. Ahimsa is the rule. But, and yes, there can be lots of other moral discussion. We're not going to dive into that right now because there's a bigger point that we want to get to and the practicality of it. So first of all, don't kill anyone. Just set that as a rule. Don't kill anyone. Don't hurt anyone. Don't kill a flea, for God's sake. Don't kill a tree. Don't kill anyone or anything. Okay, please. Now, can we set that over here for a moment? What this is speaking to is that you cannot be killed. That you cannot be killed. And okay, now, mind might say, well, does that mean I should just go run off a cliff then because I can't be killed? No, it doesn't, because there's karma. And just as I was discussing a little bit earlier, we were talking about, what if I would have killed myself? Well, can I really kill myself? No, I can tell you I can't. But in the delusion from which I suffered, yeah, absolutely, I could have perpetrated an act that would have caused me even more suffering. And I would have had to have come back again and again. I don't know how many more times. In what forms, I don't know. I really don't know. But I know it wouldn't have been good. So I'm happy that I didn't. I'm thankful that I didn't. And of course, for the ones that have, it's fine too, because we just have to work it out. You know, forgive them all. Forgive everyone. Forgive everyone. Forgive yourself. Forgive everyone. Don't hold a grudge against anyone, for God's sake, because it'll come back to bite us. This is also Gita teaching. But here's the point. You cannot be killed. So don't go off and be stupid. But here's a question now. Think about this. If you really know that you are eternal, if you really know that you are not this body, if you really know that pain, pleasure, all of the experiences of this world, that they're just fleeting, they come, they go, that when pleasure comes, pain will follow it, that when pain comes, pleasure will follow it. If you really know that, and if you know that you are eternal, that if this body goes or when this body goes, that you are not affected by it. If you really know that all these people that have these near-death experiences, that they're right, if you really know it, if it's really your experience, what happens to fear? What happens to anger? What happens to grief? What happens to the desire to attain things in order to be happy? What happens to suffering? You see? This is how it's practical. Because freedom from suffering is possible. It's not just that, it's your path. And it comes in knowing yourself. It comes in knowing yourself. And this small self in giving up the small self, giving it up or offering it to the one. comes from this. We're always sacrificing. We're always giving something. We're giving time. We're giving resource. We're giving energy. We're giving thought. We're always giving something, and we get something in return. This world is a marketplace. And to be in the truth, giving is also required. Giving of yourself will allow you to attain to the self, to the knowledge, the wisdom of the true self. The Buddha was once asked, not once, many times, I'm sure. He was asked, what did you get for those 6 years under the Bodhi tree? All of that sitting and meditating and all of that. What did you get out of it? And he says, nothing. But I tell you what I lost. Fear, anger, hatred, greed, the feeling of separation. So we'll just take a few slokas, and as I said, one more that I'd like to take a little bit of time with, but I'd like to just elucidate a little bit of what's here, and also this idea of practice. It's said that to learn Vedanta, to learn the highest teaching, 3 steps are required, and the 3 steps go with each other. The first is Shravana, or listening. And we want this to be as deep as possible, which means we have to let go of our stuff more and more and more in order to hear, so that we're free to hear. Second, manana, or contemplation, considering, rolling around. And like the first, it means we want to be able to have a pure contemplation, unflavored by limited notions, limited desires. We want to truly get at deep understanding, rooted in a purified intellectual inquiry, purified discernment, good questions, real questions. These are called vichara, or asking the question, and viveka, or the discrimination in Sanskrit. And the third step is nididhyasana, which means to act out, to act or to live in accordance with the meditation, with the truth teaching. So first, listening to the truth, meditating on the truth, and then third, imbibing in the truth, living the truth. And here the Gita takes great attention and focus at teaching us how to live the truth. And I can say from personal experience, it's quite lucid in this way, and so beneficial that it's actually possible to live a life according to the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita and to not miss out on anything, to be free to enjoy the experiences that come to us, and to transcend this state of suffering. It's possible by really listening, contemplating, and living. So in order, Karma Yoga is next, chapter 3, the yoga of action, but really the yoga of action, selfless action. How to use this action, which seems to be incessant with us. There's always something going on, inside or outside. How to use this action, in a strategic way and an intelligent way in order to lead to our freedom. For that, we take the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We recognize that doing is required, so we put others first instead of ourselves, and we do to and for others in the same way that we would want for us. And this is really the teaching of Karma Yoga. And it goes quite deep, of course, but Karma Yoga first. And then, action and renunciation, chapter 4, which means acting and renouncing the fruits of the action. Acting, renouncing the fruits, offering the fruits. Fruits are what comes as a result of it. Doing your best and letting God's will rule what happens and not being attached to the results of it. This is a formula. And as we discussed, yoga of meditation is next. And then we step into more of the jnana yoga, knowledge and realization, yoga of absolute truth, the yoga of the regal science and royal secret, divine manifestations, cosmic form, where Lord Krishna shows himself in his big body, universal body. And then we come to bhakti yoga, yoga of devotion, such a beautiful chapter. And then we get back to the science of yoga, yoga of the field and the knower of the field, the relationship between the pure I am and I am this or that. The field is the this or that, the thoughts, the objects, and understanding the relationship and helping us to identify with the I am, the pure, the inner, the observer, Sakshi, the silent witness. And really learning step by step how to live a life of freedom, how to come into the freedom and how to recognize the object from the subject. The subject is eternal, the object is fleeting, momentary, always passing, always coming, always going. The thoughts, the desires, the objects themselves, the experiences, always coming and going. You see that? It'll always be so. You're not going to find happiness by finding something in this world, even a deep experience of yoga, even this thing called Savikalpa Samadhi. Oh my God, it's still subject-object. And yes, it's beneficial, and yes, with yoga we're coming deeper and deeper within. But finally, it's necessary to recognize yourself, the subject. Yoga of the three qualities of nature, the gunas, essential teaching of yoga. Yoga of supreme self, the divine and the demoniacal, which is these inner urges within us. One of which is divine. The intuitive self is divine, is pure. The intuition always leads us to that which is beneficial for us and not harmful to anyone else. And the demoniacal, it's not a judgment when it's said like that. That which leads one towards suffering is sin. And not talking about an other. This is within your own world, your own actions. So definition of sin is that which leads you into greater states of suffering. It's not about something you do to someone else and some judgment of something you've done to something else. I'll say one more time. In the highest teachings in all the traditions, sin means to have come out of a state of knowing yourself and to engage in action that's harmful to you. And what's harmful to you will naturally be harmful to others as well. And then the threefold faith. Beautiful science, beautiful discussion. And finally, the last chapter, 18, summarizes the teaching in detail. The last chapter is the longest chapter. It's 78 sutras in the 18th chapter. And in it, Lord Krishna asks Arjuna, have you truly heard and understand? Have you listened with one pointed mind? Has the delusion of your ignorance finally been destroyed? To which Arjuna affirms. But here's the sloka I wanted to share, 65, which really summarizes these paths of yoga, all four of them. And this is one sutra, the only sutra that's repeated twice in the Gita. And this is where, summarizing the teaching, Lord Krishna says to Arjuna, to us, what is the way home? What is the way out of this suffering? And this is not some sweet, lovey-dovey notion of love, or the world, or any of this. It's just having stepped through what is the cause of our suffering, what are the instruments that we have at our disposal, that we have available to us to lead us out of the state of suffering, and how do we utilize them in a way that will free us from suffering. And here's the sutra. Krishna says, think always of me. Devote yourself fully to me. Offer all of your actions to me. And you shall surely have me, for you are most dear to me. And here's where it connects. This is the epitome of the teaching, the summary of the teaching. Greatest teaching, why it's said twice. And you have a very similar statement from Jesus, for example, where he says, love the Lord thy God with all of thy heart, all of thy soul, and all of thy mind, and love thy neighbor as thyself. This is yoga. This is yoga. This is the yoga of meditation. This is bhakti yoga. This is karma yoga. This is jnana yoga. So think, having used discernment and seen that you are not this body, nor even these passing thoughts or desires, then think only of me, the absolute, the goal. Use this mind to think only of me. Having recognized that whenever I do for myself, I act for myself, then invariably it causes me to suffer. It's something we've known all along, but we keep forgetting. But if I act for someone else, for the pure benefit of someone else, not expecting the fruit, not expecting to get any reward, then I don't suffer in those moments. Those are the high moments. I'm actually in a state of meditation. I feel good. I feel full. So that's karma yoga. Having recognized that acting for my own self-centered interest causes me to suffer, then act. Devote yourself fully to me and act for me. Offer all of the fruit to me. And knowing that my separation from the Absolute is a mental separation, that this little self is imaginary, and as a result of identifying with it, I've come into this state of suffering. Recognizing this, then what to do? Devotion. Devote completely to me, fully to me. In love, in devotion, your experience will show you when there's really love, when there's really devotion, you can recognize to a partner, another person, to an ideal, whatever it is, you lose yourself, your little self, in the greater, in the union of the two, or in the cause. You lose yourself in it. And in this is the way that devotion works. In devoting fully to me, says the Absolute, then you lose yourself in me. And then you will most surely have me, for you are most dear to me. Okay. So this is our little exploration of the Gita. I pray that it's of some benefit. And if you're catching towards the end, again, I pray that there's an inspiration to take these two shastras, Raja Yoga and Bhagavad Gita, and really, truly dive in. Okay, may we close with a prayer. I wish you success with all of your goals. May you have everything that you desire. May every desire be fulfilled. May you come to desire freedom. May this desire be fulfilled. May you be free, happy. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May all beings in all of the world be happy and free. Om Purnamida Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Amlo Satguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki Jai. Amlo Sri Swami Vishnu Devananda ki jai. Jai for all of the masters of all of the traditions. Jai. Jai for all of the yogis. God bless you. Thank you. I look forward to seeing you in Arizona. We're moving in a month to a new location for the ashram, Divine Grace Yoga Ashram, or in Michigan at next year's YogaFest, or maybe the upcoming retreat in August, like that. So reach out anytime.